Okay, here we go. Had some friends that have asked about how to make homemade biscuits. So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make them. First, you get your flour and sift it. And I'm making a mess, so I'll have to clean all this up. You make sure you have your pan, your Crisco, and your buttermilk. And you sift the flour into a bowl that is big enough to make biscuits in, so that you have enough flour around the edges, which winds up being probably about 7 cups of flour, because you're going to have flour left over. Some people don't do it this way. This is the way my mama did it, and this is the way I was taught, and this is my mama's biscuit bowl. When I'm making it for the family, and I'm making a lot, I make it in a bigger bowl. Dig out a little hole in the center of your, and I keep my sink back here where I can reach over and rinse off my hands when I need to. I keep me a towel handy. Alright, you shake your buttermilk good. This is a half a cup of Crisco. And it's going to go right in the middle of your little hole that you've dug out. And for more biscuits, like I said, I use a bigger bowl, and I use much more Crisco. I use a full cup. Alright, you're going to start with your Crisco. Work it a little with your hands into the flour. Not much. It's kind of like cutting butter into flour for pie crust. You're not going to cut too much before you start to add your buttermilk. And I forgot to take my lid back off. So you start pouring your buttermilk. It's going to take a little over a cup, probably about 2 cups to make the amount of biscuits that I'm making. And you work it with your fingers. And again, a lot of people don't like to do it this way. You make sure that you squeeze all of your shortening. And then you start with your hands, adding a little flour in around the edges. And it's kind of hard for me to explain this, so you sort of just need to watch and see how I'm doing this. And then I clean off my fingers, just like my mama did. I'm a little more picky than my mother. Then you kind of reach around the edges underneath your mixture, and you start kind of patting up some flour into the middle of it. And you just keep going around, kind of folding your dough back into itself. Keep going, because you're going to have a good bit of flour. And this is where some people don't like to work it in a bowl like this. They prefer to pour it out on a piece of waxed paper and that has flour spread out on it. But again, this is the way my mama taught me. It's the way my granny did it. So this is the way I do it. And they don't always turn out really pretty. Sometimes they're not real smooth on top. But you sort of keep going and pat it down. Then you put some flour on your other hand. Pinch off a little. And roll. Make sure you keep enough flour on there. I'm not real comfortable doing this. Lay it on your pan. This is funny. And just keep going all the way down. Putting out your little biscuits. And like I said, my biscuits don't turn out real smooth on top always. But it's the taste I'm always after, not the looks. Now my son, he makes a pretty biscuit. He doesn't do his exactly like I do mine, but he sticks to the same basic recipe. He puts his out on a piece of waxed paper with flour, and then he pinches it off. But he's got big hands. He can make them smooth. I don't have big hands, so mine don't turn out real smooth. In the meantime, make sure you got your oven preheated to about 450 degrees. The hotter the oven, the crisper the crust around the outside, the less time it takes to cook. And you just keep going until you've got a pan of biscuits here. When I get through, I'll put them in the oven. And my biscuits are not as big as my mama's. My mama made what they called cat head biscuits. They were as big as a cat's head. So did my granny. And they were good, hot, buttered, cold, jelly on them, didn't matter. One of my favorites is to take butter and mash it up with some sorghum syrup and sock that biscuit in it. Another good thing we like with it is either white gravy, what some people call sawmill gravy. We usually make our gravy from the renderings left from cooking a pan of sausage. And we also like red-eye gravy. Red-eye gravy is where you cook your country ham, and after what's left in the pan from the country ham, you add a cup of coffee to. Sometimes I'll have enough to make what my mother called a hoe cake. And that's when you take a little small iron skillet. I've got one that's about 7 inches and I've got a 9-inch. And you put what's left of your dough in there. After you've done that, then you put that in the oven and pat it down a little bit, and it makes a nice